let's begin with a bracha for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam asher kibtzanu v'tzivanu la'asok Torah. Okay.
So, Rabbi,
Yes.
what's the difference between us saying that bracha and what we do during Shabbat services before the Torah service when we say three bracha, three different?
So the Talmud discusses it discusses what you should say before, what the bracha is before studying Torah, and it comes up with three possibilities. What we've been saying on Shabbat morning before our Torah study is all three of them, because the conclusion that the Talmud comes to is that since you've got three different opinions, well, let's just say them all, but let's turn them into a single long bracha.
Okay.
And that is done by adding a v in front of the second and third bracha, or the second bracha, to connect it together. There's also discussion that if a person does not say the brachot for Torah study when they wake up in the day, that when they say it during Shacharit, when they say the second paragraph, the second bracha before the Shema, which we haven't gotten to yet, that the recitation of that qualifies as a bracha for Torah study for the rest of the day.
Okay.
So, anyways, long answer. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. Y'all see that?
Yes.
All right. Fantastic. All right. So, if you recall, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the structure of the main part of the morning service, which is the Shema with the blessings around it. So we started with the Barukh, which is the call to prayer. And then the first of the two blessings before the Shema is Yotzer. And last week we talked about that opening blessing, Yotzer or vorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei hakol, creates light, fashions darkness, makes peace, and makes everything. We're going to touch on that a little bit today as well. The second bracha is Birkat HaTorah, the blessings of Torah, which the theme is revelation. That's, Cindy, that's the one that I was referring to, that if we forgot to say the blessings for Torah study at the beginning of the day, this recitation of Birkat HaTorah before the Shema would qualify. Then we get the Shema with its 3 paragraphs. And then there's the third bracha after the Shema, which is, the theme is Geula, or redemption. So that's the structure. Today and next week, we're going to be focusing on the details of that first bracha that comes before the Shema, the bracha of Yotzer. So where do we get this bracha? So for that, we need to go back to the Mishnah. Mishnah, recall, is the first written code of Jewish law. It began to be, let's say, recorded in oral form after the destruction of the first temple, year 70, continues for the next 6 generations or so until it's finally kind of organized, edited, redacted by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Judah the Prince, in Sipori, around the year 200. So this is what the Mishnah has to say about the morning service, or this part of the morning service. It says, B'shachar, shachar is morning, like shacharit, B'shachar mevarech shtayim lefaneha ve'achat la'achareha. In the morning, we say a blessing, 2 before it, ve'achat la'achareha, 1 after it, and the it being the Shema. All right, 2 blessings before, 1 blessing after. Uva erev mevarech shtayim lefaneha u'shtayim la'achareha, and in the evening, 2 before it and 2 after it. So we see that in the morning we've got 2 before and 1 after, and the evening 2 before and 2 after. So we're going to get an extra blessing afterwards. All right. Sorry, I just had a student who is trying to get in, unable to get in. I'm going to quickly see if I can send the information to them. All right. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, so so we got we've seen the number of blessings before and after the Shema for the morning and for the evening service. Makom achat aruka va'achat ktsara. Whether it is long or whether it is short, and this, although it's written in a very concise way, this is referring to the blessing after the Shema in the evening service only. So this expression, whether long or whether short, refers only to one of the blessings in the evening service. We don't need to worry about that right now. But now we continue. Makom shamru la'arich eno rashai lekatzer, lekatzer eno rashai la'arich. So in a place where the sages said to elongate, it is not permissible to make it short. And to make it short, it's not permissible to make it long. Lachtom eino rashai shelo lachtom, shelo lachtom eino rashai lachtom. To chatom, to make a seal, it's not permissible not to make a seal. Not to make a seal, it is not permissible to make a seal. All right, that's a little bit confusing, right? So we seem to be talking about messing with the structure of the services that the sages have developed. And if you recall, we've talked about blessings that are where there's an opening blessing, and then an elaboration of some sort, and then a closing blessing, right? So that closing blessing, that's called the seal of the blessing, right? So we've got a kind of intro bracha, closing bracha, but together that makes one bracha. If you remember, we had during Pesukei de Zimra, we started with Baruch She'amar, we ended with Yishtabach, and both of those have a Baruch Atah format, but they're essentially a single bracha, the beginning and the ending of the single bracha. That ending part is called the seal. So in addition, in terms of lengthening a blessing, so this, I think, has something to do with adding lots of elaboration in the middle. All right. And so what this is saying is that when the sages want you to elaborate, you should elaborate and don't take shortcuts. When they want you to have a full blessing with a beginning and an ending, make sure you do that. Don't just leave it hanging. And if they want a short blessing, just keep it short. That seems to be what this Mishnah is getting at. And this is all that the Mishnah has to say about the blessings before and after the Shema. So what questions do we have?
A whole lot.
A whole lot. What's the most obvious question?
What are the blessings?
What are the blessings, right? It just assumes that we know what these blessings are. The Mishnah doesn't see fit to tell us, which I guess would suggest that to the community that the Mishnah is directed to, they already know, right? There's not a question that you're supposed to say these blessings before and after the Shema. The only question is how many and what the particular structure needs to be, but the themes are well established at this point. Of course, that is not going to be satisfying for the Gemara. The Gemara, its first question is always going to be, well, what's the blessing? And that is exactly what we are going to see. So, my mevarech, that's what the Gemara asks. Well, what do we bless, right? Rabbi Yaakov, so Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Oshaya. So Rabbi Yaakov citing Rabbi Oshaya. What's the blessing? Yotzer or uvore choshech. We've seen this, right? This is what we studied last time. God, you forms light and creates darkness, and then the rest of it is Oseh shalom uvorei et hakol, who makes peace and creates evil. I am the Lord who does all things. We're quoting Isaiah, right? So this is what Isaiah says. So Rabbi Yaakov, in the name of Rabbi Oshaya, is saying that, well, the basis for this first blessing before the Shema should be this verse from Isaiah. All right? But then he says, Lema yotzer or uvare noga. Well, we got a problem. He doesn't like the idea that we are mentioning darkness in this blessing, right? He says we should change it. We should say yotzer or, fashions light, uvore noga, and who creates brightness, right? Now, why would he say that?
Doesn't like God creating negative things.
Or evil is associated with the darkness.
Okay, so maybe there's something evil about darkness, and that's what he's getting at. That's a possibility. Any other possibilities?
Well, light does create brightness. So if he forms the light, that would create brightness.
Okay.
So
in contrast.
In darkness, you have nothing, so nothing's happening.
In darkness, we have, okay. So if you want to say darkness is the absence of creation, perhaps.
Correct.
Okay. Right. And after all, these are the morning blessings, right? We should be praising God for making light.
Yeah.
Why are we mentioning it would be inappropriate to be talking about God making darkness, at the prayers which we're reciting as the sun is coming up?
Well, it's in contrast. It's a contrast because we have the day is light and the night is dark. So both of them were created by God.
Right, but
And
right now we're davening the morning blessings. Why should we talk about?
Because we're talking about. Yeah.
About 2 weeks ago, I thought we were talking about that God creates everything. And so
Right.
the contrast of light and darkness is that it's all created by God.
It's all right. So
It's the gamut.
The whole gamut, right? And we talked about the hakol, the everything is in there. And we also talked about the original context in Isaiah as being kind of a polemic against this dualism that was surrounding them in Persia, but they're not living in Persia anymore, right?
Mm.
So that particular significance isn't perhaps as meaningful. So in any event, we have Rabbi Yaakov, in the name of Rabbi Oshaya, suggesting we should change it and only be focused on light. All right, but the Gemara is going, and the Gemara will often do this. It'll kind of create a straw man argument. It creates an artificial argument. Whenever you see the Gemara presenting arguments back and forth in Aramaic that are unattributed, that's generally understood to be a very late layer of the Gemara. And it's the editors that are trying to kind of go through different aspects of an issue and expand it and actually make it easier for us to understand what's going on. And so that's what's happening here. So they say, Kidichtiv ka'amrinan. We should say it the way it's written, right? Right. This was the surprising thing. What are you doing taking biblical verses, right? Part of our sacred scripture, right? These divine texts, and changing them, right? Who do you think you are, right? We should keep it as it's written. All right. Ella me'ata oseh shalom uvore ra mi kamrinan kidichtiv. Well, if that's the case, if you think it's so important that we maintain the scriptural integrity, then what are you going to do about the next part of Isaiah's verse when he says makes peace and creates evil? Do we say this as it's written? So in other words, we're already saying the hakol part. We've already changed the text. And what Rabbi Oshaya wants to do is he wants to change it still further and get rid of darkness, right? And so the Gemara is raising this obvious challenge and saying, well, we've already changed it. So what's so problematic about changing it a second time? Ella ktiv ra b'karenan hakol lishana ma'alya. So he says, no, you misunderstand, right? It may be written ra in the verse, and we may say hakol, everything. So we've substituted evil for everything, but we're doing that because of lishana ma'alya, literally that's exalted language, right? It's euphemistic, right? We all know that the verse says Ra, right? And we mean Ra when we say Hakol, right? We know that. We know it's in our head. We just don't want to say it, right? And so we're not changing scripture. It's like, it's like saying he who must not be named, right? So we don't want to bring ourselves to say it. And so we make a substitution, but we understand what the meaning is. All right. And now
the irony is that we don't know that today. Most people
we
don't.
forgot exactly.
Oh,
But not us, not us.
Right, not us.
of course not.
I mean, granted, it'll be correct in the Tanakh, but
Yeah. So, all right.
Now, Rabbi,
Yes.
wouldn't people who prefer Orthodox Siddurim criticize the conservative Siddur for doing euphemistic changes to this? Yet it's been done way back at this point in time.
Well, yeah. That's. I think that is. What did we say? That whoever we start at the very beginning. Like anybody who wants to change something has to claim to be more authentic than the thing that they're changing.
How
Right.
are they more? How are they higher than Isaiah?
Well, there's one saying that it was the rabbis of the Talmud, right? They had this kind of divinely inspired understanding or intellect that we don't have. So while it might be okay for them, it's not okay for us, right? That's the argument. It's kind of it's built on the understanding of Yeridat Hadarot, the decline of the generations. The farther we are from Sinai, the less pious we are, the less knowledge we have. So that's one attitude, right? I would say we're standing on the shoulders of giants. So, and so maybe we do have a little bit more power to put our own understanding and spin on things as well. In any event, the Gemara is not done with this. So it says, Hachanami lema noga lishana ma'alya. All right, if you think you can say Hakol and have Ra in your mind, well, let's do the same thing with Noga and Choshech, right? We can say brilliance, and you can have in your mind that you understand that Isaiah was really said darkness, but we're saying brightness because this whole prayer is about celebrating God's creation of the daytime, of light and brightness. And so we can use this same principle of euphemistic language here as well. All right, so that's the Gemara's little back and forth. And now we're going to get back into some named figures, which means that we have an earlier stratum of the Gemara's discussion, right? Ela amar Rava. So Rava says, Kadei lahaskir midat yom balayla, midat layla bayom. So the reason that we keep that first part of Isaiah as it is, even though we're celebrating lightness, is because we want to mention the quality of day in the night and the quality of night in the day, or the attribute of these things, right? So we understand that creation, in fact, is not just about light, that in fact it is about darkness, that the two kind of go hand in hand. And so when we're celebrating God's creation of light, we're going to mention the creation of darkness. And similarly, when we celebrate God's creation of darkness, we're going to also mention God's creation of light. And all of this is meant to really even further exalt God as the creator of the universe. All right, so then the Gemara is going to come back. Bishlama midat laila bayom, kida amrina yoser over choshech. All right, that makes perfect sense what you say, Rava, that we're mentioning the attribute of nighttime during the day. After all, we've got the blessing, yotzer or uvore choshech, right? You form light, you create darkness, right? It's right there, right in front of us, all right? Ela midat yom balayla hechi mishkachet la. But the attribute of day in the nighttime, where do we find it? Okay, so for this, I want us to open our Siddurim. Let's see. If you've got the Siddur Sim Shalom for Shabbat and festivals, we can open up to page 28. And if you've got the weekday Sim Shalom, you can open up to page 137. Okay, so what you'll see, this is, in both cases, this is the first page of the evening service. Let's look right after the Barukh. You see that where that is on the page, we get, in fact, our text very conveniently tells us it's the first bracha before Kriyat Shema, right? The first bracha before the Shema. So let's go to the very end of that paragraph. We get the closing bracha. What is the closing bracha? So it's the last 5 words of the paragraph.
It's an hour of nightfall.
Yeah. So our English translation, for each evening's dusk. I hate that translation. The Hebrew is Hama'ariv Aravim, right? You hear that word Erev being doubled up. Ma'ariv is a verb, the verb for Erev, and our Erev is, and Aravim is the plural for Erev. So Hama'ariv is the one who makes it evening, and Aravim is evenings. So I would be, the closest translation I can come to this is, praised are you, Lord, who evening assizes the evenings. Right?
What about nightfall? Because that's what it says in the Sim Shalom.
Oh, like the old Sim Shalom?
Well, yeah.
What does it say?
It says, beloved are you, Adonai, for this hour of nightfall.
Mine doesn't say that.
Beloved.
I didn't know
Where
that I
does
had
beloved
an
come
old,
from?
I don't know, I didn't know I had an older version. Actually, it's the one Natasha had for her bat mitzvah. So that's 10 years
Oh,
ago.
wait, what page are you on?
28?
28.
Oh, you're looking at the poem at the bottom.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It was
Sorry, you're right. Otherwise, it's for each evening's dusk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for each evening's dusk, which I think doesn't capture the alliteration of the Hebrew. In
Well, I
any
guess the
event,
poem captures it better.
I'm sure. Yeah,
Oh, who?
for this hour of nightfall. It's much more personal and intimate.
Mm-hmm.
So Rava has just suggested back in the Talmud that we are mentioning daytime at night and nighttime at day. And the Gemara comes back and says, wait a second. During the daytime, we say Yotzer Or Vorei Choshech. So we have a mentioning of Choshech, of darkness, during our morning prayers. But where is the mention of daytime during the evening prayers? All it says is Hama'ariv Aravim, right? You make evening come, right? So where's the daytime, right? So that's the Gemara's question. And then the answer, Amar Abaye, Golel Or Mipnei Choshech V'Choshech Mipnei Or. So for this, we've got to back up a few lines.
Right before the box.
Yeah, the 4th line down, really, and in both of them. It's the 4th line down, the last word on the line in Hebrew, where it says, Golel Or Mipnei Choshech V'Choshech Mipnei Or. Golel means to roll something away, right? Galila, like when we lift up we roll the Torah closed, that's Galila, it's the rolling of the Torah. So Golel Or Mipnei Choshech, he rolls away the light from before the darkness and the darkness from before the light, right? So now that is inside the paragraph where we're talking about the of the first blessing before the Shema. So while we don't have the entire text, we do have this little snippet of a phrase that Abaye is mentioning. So where it came from, did Abaye compose it? Maybe Abaye came to Rava's rescue and threw in this extra little phrase. What seems to be the case is that at least by the time of the Gemara, the particular wordings of the brachot have have locked it down, right? So we know what it is. We know that the bracha is Hama'ariv Aravim, and we know that it doesn't mention anything to do with daytime, but daytime is mentioned earlier on in the prayer, and probably, or maybe because of what Rava said, is that we should mention the daylight at night and the nighttime during the day.
In one of the poems, it refers to sunset and sunrise, which I think is a nice way of acknowledging.
Yeah. So, what is Erev? Right.
Evening.
Erev is evening. But it's really the time of transition, right? So you might refer to morning, to dusk, or so to dawn as also an Erev, right? So we've got an Erev at the end of the day and an Erev at the beginning of the day as well, right? So maybe Hama'ariv Aravim. What is the Aravim? It's plural. What are the Erevs? Maybe the bracha itself is referring to both Erevs, the one at the beginning of the day and the one at the end of the day. It's possible. Anyways, this is the Gemara's discussion, and this is all that the Gemara has to say about the content of the first blessing after before the Shema. That's
Rabbi?
it.
Rabbi,
Yes.
regarding the term Erev,
Yeah.
it never seems to apply to mean the evening of a holiday, like Erev Rosh Hashanah doesn't seem to be after Rosh Hashanah starts in the evening. It always seems to be referring to the day before Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, Erev Rosh Hashanah is the period of time leading up to the beginning of the holiday. Yeah.
So to your
I
point,
always looked at it as the evening that it starts, but it's not. So.
No, it's actually before that, right? So
Okay.
Erev Shabbos is before candlelighting.
Afternoon. Okay.
Yeah. So
that favors this this transition translation. I've heard it more of a mixture. But yeah.
Yeah.
that
So yes, that's another. An Erev, le'arev, is to mix something together. Right? In the wilderness, there was all of these non-Israelites that attached themselves to the Israelites as they were going through the wilderness. They're called the Irbuvia, the mixed multitude.
it's a great word.
Right? And Eruv, which is what enables us to carry outside of our homes on Shabbat, is when people in a community take food and they mix it together. You mix the food from different households together in a common place. And by doing so, established this more public area as a private domain, right? But again, it's the mixture. So you could look at the Erev as being the mixture of daylight and nighttime, right? Which happens twice every 24 hours.
But then there goes the use of Erev as the whole day before.
Yeah, well, I mean, language often takes things in different directions as far as meaning, but you can see the origin of the words. That doesn't mean it has to always mean the exact same thing for all time. We know that language doesn't work that way. Okay, so we are not very much closer to understanding what the bracha is that we should be saying, just what really one sentence of it, right? Which is inspired by Isaiah, we could say. All right, now, what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah gave us a structure. We got Shema, 2 blessings before, 1 blessing after. How many parts is that?
4.
4 parts, right? As you know, we have a tradition that likes to add things and does not like to take things away very much. So this is not enough, right? We can't have just a single blessing. So we've got to expand it. And so that is what the tradition did
despite the Mishnah telling them not to.
Well, no, not necessarily. Let's go back to what the Mishnah said. It said, when they said that you should lengthen it, you're not allowed to shorten it. So they don't tell us the Mishnah doesn't tell us whether or not we're supposed to lengthen it. The implication is that we are supposed to lengthen it, right? So we've got this theme of Yotzer Or, of light that we're saying in the morning. we're supposed to both lengthen it as well as seal it, right? So we know we need to have some sort of expansion of the theme, and that we're supposed to bring it to a close with a final bracha, right? That, I mean, the Mishnah doesn't say that explicitly. The Talmud didn't really say that either. I would say that based on what our tradition has done with it, that's how it was understood, and probably was the intention. Why would they be mentioning that in this place if that weren't the case? All right, so let's come back to here. So what happened in starting in early medieval times is you started to see lots of expansions on the themes that come up in the Shema and its blessings. So they get some names. So Guf HaYotzer means the body of the Yotzer, right? So there we're talking very directly about God creating light, right? The bracha itself seems to be along those themes. Ophan, we'll run into this word later. It's a word for angel. There's a lot of different words for angel that appear in the Bible, and even within the Bible itself, some of those words take on mystical connotations. We're going to see that as well. The word literally means wheel. If you are familiar with Ezekiel's vision of the chariot, he describes these ophanim, who are, kind of the wheels of the chariot. But it doesn't mean wheel. It means angel in this context, but it's associated with the chariot. Me'orah is light. Ahava is love. Zulat, there's no God but you. Zulat means other than. Michamocha, who is like you, and Geula is redemption. And so we've got 7 parts. So what initially started as 3 blessings get expanded into 7 blessings. And there's lots of different treatments. And if you go into Geniza fragments, we find lots of examples of prayer compositions, throughout the medieval period of time that touch on different aspects of these themes and are placed at various parts in the service. In the High Holiday Liturgy especially, we see lots and lots of piyutim, lots of poems that get added into the machzor. The machzor that we're using now, Lev Shalem, has actually cut out, I don't think it includes any piyutim during this part of the service. But if you looked at a more traditional machzor, you would actually find a lot of piyutim inserted into these parts of the service in the high holidays. And there are also, if you looked at Siddurim that are focused specifically on holidays, there are holiday-specific piyutim that were composed and that are still included in some traditions. So, but we're gonna Yotzer. The first blessing focuses on these 3 sections. And if you'll notice, there's 7 sections, and that is not a coincidence. 7 is a very important number, and we'll see that. Okay, how numerous are your words? As we have seen, much of Jewish prayer is, if not based directly on, is at least inspired by passages from the Bible. So this is from Psalm 104. Psalm 104 is the creation psalm. It's the psalm that we recite on Rosh Chodesh, on the new month, as the special psalm for Rosh Chodesh. And it describes a scene of creation. And included in that description is this beautiful verse. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai kulam bechokhma asita mal'ah ha'aretz kinyanecha. So marabu is how great or how numerous are your ma'asecha, are your creations or your deeds, O Lord. Kulam, all of them, right? There's our word kol, again, that's an important word in this part of the service. Kulam bichokhma asita. All of them in wisdom you made, all of them in wisdom. Mal'ah ha'aretz kinyanecha. The earth is full of your creations, or really a kinyan is your possessions, your acquisitions. But God kind of owns everything in the world, you could say, by virtue of God being the creator. So this is a beautiful passage. What are the themes that we see here?
That all of creation was very well strategized in wisdom.
Okay. We connect wisdom with creation. All right. When we say how numerous, marabu, it's almost like saying it can't be counted. Right? We could try, but it's uncountable. And everything, God, absolutely everything in the world is a creation of God, right? So this is in Psalms, right? So this is pretty early. Now this is the first paragraph of that first blessing. So, and for this one, you need to look at the weekday Siddur. This is not in the, this is not recited on Shabbat. We have a substitute for this on Shabbat. So this we are going to find on page 30 in the Siddur Sim Shalom for weekdays. If you have
It's on page 109 in Shabbat and festivals.
Oh
it's
yeah,
there.
Actually you're right. It is there. Never mind.
Right, what page was that?
Okay.
30.
3?
So
30.
in weekday, it's on page 30, and Max, you are correct. It is on page 109 in the Siddur for Shabbat and festivals. The reason being that when it is a festival, we are reciting the paragraph that's used on a weekday because the Shabbat one is only for Shabbat. So you'll find that one on the bottom of the page 109, where it says on weekdays. This is the elongation of the blessing that the Mishnah made reference to, or at least this is the elongation of the blessing that we have in our Siddur. I'm sure that there were lots and lots of different versions of this, or variations, or maybe even completely different editions that existed up until the point where this got kind of locked in as in our Siddur. So let's see if we can identify some of the themes here. Hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha barachamim. Right? He gives light to the earth and to those who dwell upon it in mercy. Uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit. And in his goodness renews every day continually the work of creation. Visibly familiar. Marabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, mal'ah ha'aretz kinyanecha. How numerous are your works, Adonai. You made them, all of them, in wisdom. The earth is full of your creations. We had no need here to change any of what the psalmist said. The psalmist said it perfectly, and we're gonna let his words speak for themselves. Hamelech hamaromam levado me'az. He is the king exalted, alone since the beginning of time. HaMeshubach v'haMefoar v'hamitnaseh mimot olam. Praised, glorified, and elevated since the world began. Elohei olam barachamecha harabim rachem aleinu. Eternal God, in your great compassion, have compassion on us. Adonu zenu, tzur miskavenu, magen yishenu, miskav ba'adenu. Lord of our strength, rock of our refuge, shield of our salvation, refuge on our behalf. All right. What are the themes?
Thankfulness.
Mm-hmm. Thankfulness for what?
For everything that God created, and for giving us all these creations that abound.
Okay.
and that Hashem is our pillar of strength, it says, in protection and sheltering shield. So it's also being grateful for that, I guess, too.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting. It says that he renews every day his works of creation.
Yeah.
That's an
Right. This does not want to leave creation 5,000 years ago. It wants to say every day you are you are our pillar and our rock, and that God is still at it.
Yeah.
And
What-
that it
what-
kind of
what is-
ties creation as it happened all back then to what God is doing for the Jewish people.
Does it say anything about the Jewish people?
No.
Well, it says us. Pillar of strength. Who is God protecting and being a rock for? Not explicitly, yes, but
But who would be reading this? Somebody Jewish.
Oh, we're reading it, but I mean, look at the very first line. Hamayir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha. Right? He gives light to the earth and to everything that dwells upon it.
It just, I guess,
Yeah.
thinking about every night the stars come out,
Mhm.
the moon comes out, for everything that's around us. It happens every day. And that's the renewal. Maybe, that is for us the renewal of a new day, and that we have that. And only God, and God is responsible for giving us that and everything else. So I don't see where it's, and just don't lose sight of it, I guess.
So we don't even bring out the us until the end of this, toward the end of this particular prayer. It started off totally universal,
Yeah.
right? There's a daily constant act of creation that takes place. And here, if we're reciting these words as the sun is rising, or in the early parts of the morning of the daylight, it's the rising of the sun that is that daily renewal and act of creation. We saw themes of wisdom in this and themes of compassion. Only at the
Mercy,
end-
he refers to mercy.
Yeah, that's rachem, right? Rachamecha harabim rachem, right? You're filled with mercy. Give us some of that mercy, right?
Yeah.
Was the us, is it implied Israel? Possibly, right? Quite possibly. But that's a shift that only happens at the end. We start by acknowledging God as the creator of everything, right? The entire universe is dependent upon God's daily, constant act of creation. And so, I'm thinking of a Grateful Dead song, like shine your love light, let it shine on me, right? So that's what this is. That's what Jerry was singing about, I guess. Let your love light shine on me. Now, I also want to point out just some of the structure of this as a prayer. It's not really a poem. But the writer, it does play with language a little bit. Right here, Hamishubach v'hamefoar v'hamitnasei mimot olam. You can hear the and then here at the end, you see Adonu zenu tzur miskabenu magen yishenu miskab ba'adenu. First of all, we've got the rhyme. We've got this 2-word pattern. We've got a word for God and then what God does for us. And so whenever you get a kind of a repeating structure like that, I think we need to look at it as form over content, right? That the form is trying to convey something. Remember, this is all being written and prayed at a time when there are no Siddurim. The person who is reciting this either is making it up on the spot or knows it and is memorizing it and reciting it on behalf of people who don't know it. And so there's an aesthetic quality to the experience of hearing this as well. And so the sound and the rhythm and the rhyming and the alliteration, all of that is really important for the prayer experience.
Is the assumption that it's easier to memorize something that has that rhythm and rhyme to it, or just that it's an aesthetic, piece?
Probably a bit of both. I mean, why?
Rabbi?
Yeah, I mean, things that have rhyme are definitely easier to remember. The meter makes it easier to remember. Yeah, but there's the performative quality of it as well. Yeah.
Rabbi, this is a lame question. Where is this in our weekday Siddur?
Oh, it's the first, immediately after Yotzer Or Vorei Choshech. It's the paragraph immediately following that.
What page?
30.
Weekday Siddur, it's on page 30. In the Shabbat one, it's on 109 at the bottom.
It's just mind-boggling to think You know, we learn everything. We have books, things are written down, we can read them. How did all these people learn all this? It's amazing. You ever think about this?
I try and think about it all the time.
Yeah, it's
I bet it sounds as cacophonous as when we're together on Shabbat and everybody's
no, but the idea
talk
of
and sing at the
knowing,
same time.
how did they know this? I mean, it must have
They might not.
taken an awful long time for everybody to learn this.
I think before people had books, people used their memory much more than we do. And if you think about those of us who are older, before we had everything written down, I mean, I know as a kid, I used to know probably 50 or more phone numbers in my head.
Mm.
We just didn't think about it. We just remembered them because we needed to.
Yeah.
I think it was the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, but this
The
is a
word
lot.
the word
This is a
Mishnah.
lot.
The word Mishnah means to repeat. And the idea is that you heard some, you know, the teacher would say the words, and you would repeat the words after them because you didn't have a copy of it in front of you. And in doing so, you would memorize it.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's certainly remarkable.
Well, it's like an actor
I'm
learning
having
their
a hard time
lines.
finding this. I still can't find it.
What Siddur are you in, Cindy?
30.
The weekday.
Hold it up.
Oh no, I'm in the Shabbat. That's why. I thought I was in a weekday. Sorry.
Okay, so let's see what comes next. The paragraph immediately following. These are not written together, but they're now placed together in our Siddur. So we're going to notice some things about this. So here we're looking again in the weekday, it's on page 30, page 109 on Shabbat. It's the last paragraph on the page in both cases. In the Siddur Sim Shalom, they help us understand something about the structure with the use of bold. What do you notice?
In bold.
An acrostic.
It's an acrostic, right? This is in alphabetical order. We got El, Aleph, Baruch, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. All right. So anytime we get an acrostic, we should first of all understand form over content. Right? We're trying to say this is true A to Z. All right. I'm going to read this and listen. This is poetry. So listen for just the sound. El Baruch Gedol De'ah Hechinu Fa'al Zohorei Chama Tov Yatzar Kavod Lishmo Me'orot Natan Svivot Uzo Pinot Tzva'av Kedoshim Romamei Shaddai Tamid Misaprim Kavod El Ukdushato.
Well, it's got rhyme and rhythm to it.
What's the rhyme?
Im.
Yeah, so let's look. So we start, first two lines are o, im, o. Right? So we've got the first two and the last line rhyme with each other, and then you've got 3 and 4 rhyming and 5 and 6 rhyme. Right? Plus, it's an alphabetical acrostic. Certainly makes it easier to memorize. And we'll see lots of uses of acrostic. We already saw them when we saw the Ashrei. So this is a long established feature of prayer, is we like to spell things out in our prayers. All right, so let's see if we can identify some themes in this rhyming acrostic. The blessed God of great knowledge prepared and activated the lights of the sun. The good one created honor for his name, putting lights around his strength. His chief hosts are holy, exalting the Almighty, always telling of God's glory and of his holiness. And then we get the final line, which is not part of the poem. Be blessed, Adonai our God, for the excellent work of your hands and for the glowing lights that you created, they will glorify you. All right, so what are the themes in El Baruch?
Light.
Okay.
One of them is light.
Lots of light.
Grace of God.
Okay.
Reminding of the creation of, what was it, the second day when it creates the sun and the moon and the stars?
Okay, so can you say a little more about that, Mike?
I read that and I see Genesis. It's just a rewording of God's creating the stars and then the sun and the moon, and all of these are mentioned here.
Right. So for those who've been in our Midrash, our Bereshit Rabbah class, these are a lot of themes, and in fact, similar words. Me'orot is a word that appears on day 4 of creation, right? Referring to all of the lights in the sky, sun, moon, and stars, and planets. Right? So when it says putting lights around his strength, the lights in question, these are the heavenly lights. Is there a picture that you're seeing here?
I'm just seeing a big background where showing the great things that God has done, and in the background, then God's in the foreground, sort of thing, like a movie poster.
Who are God's chief hosts?
The angels.
The angels, right? So I would, my hunch is that the El Baruch and the Hamir Ir La'aretz, the previous one, were written independently, right? You had some prayer leader. One guy writes in prose, another guy writes in poetry, and they take the different approaches. Not only is the form, but even some of the themes they focus on a little bit different. Both, though, are playing with mystical themes, right? There are 2 branches of ancient mysticism. One is called Maaseh Merkavah, the work of the chariot, and that's a field of mystical study focused on understanding Ezekiel's chariot. And the other is Maaseh Bereshit, which is the works of creation. That's trying to uncover the hidden secrets, mystical secrets in the works of creation. And so it would seem that certainly this prayer, and maybe the preceding one also, are actually composed by Maaseh Bereshit mystics, right? People in the mystical field who are then, bringing some of the themes, some of the symbols into the prayers that they're composing for their Shacharit service. The term itself, we see the term Maaseh Bereshit, that may clue us in. We saw that in the previous paragraph. Right? Here we have an image of God surrounded by the angels, and in fact, God is it's God's light which is illuminating the angels, right? So when we look up in the sky and we see the sun shining, or the moon, or the planets, or maybe the comet, that's I don't know if it's still up there, Neowise, right? That these are reflecting the divine glory, and that reflection is there. This is what exalting the Almighty, always telling of God's glory and of His holiness, right? So there's this idea of the music of the spheres, right? So in the ancient belief system, we had Earth at the center, with different spheres of circling around the Earth, and these were different levels of angels personified by the planets and the stars and the moon and the sun, and all of these things. And there's an idea, and I think this goes back to ancient Greek thoughts of this harmony of the spheres, that everything revolving in its course upon its regular cycles, that creates a certain universal harmony, and all of that is the exaltation of the Creator. That's the final line. Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach maaseh yadecha ve'al me'orei or she'asita yafarucha sela. Be blessed, Adonai, our God, for the excellent work of your hands and for the glowing lights that you created. They will glorify you. Right? So we've we've just made reference to the acts of praise that are being performed by the angels, by the lights. Right? That's what we're talking about. Any reactions?
So,
All right. So what are we talking about?
seventh heaven.
Let's go into the Talmud. We got a little bit of late start, so we'll just do this one passage, and then we'll be able to continue next week with some of the modifications for Shabbat. So this is from the Talmud, and this is a description of the seven heavens, all right, and what is in each of them. So it begins. Reish Lakish said. So this is one of the great Amoraim of the Gemara. There are seven heavens, one above the other. They have names. Velon, right? That's like a curtain, right? What's the English word? Velon or velon? That's an English word, right?
Allure.
Well, yeah, which is rolled up and down to enable the sun to go in and out. According to Isaiah, he stretched out the heavens as a curtain, right? So if you imagine that the sun is kind of waiting there, and God pulls the shades open, and then the sun goes up. That's the first heaven. Rakia, the place where the sun, moon, and stars are fixed. Shechakim, Shechakim means clouds, in which are the millstones to grind. Shachak, mana for the righteous. Zvul, the upper Jerusalem, with its temple in which Michael, archangel, offers the sacrifice at the altar. Ma'on, in which dwell the classes of ministering angels who sing by night and are silent by day, for the honor of Israel, who serve the Lord in daytime. We'll come back to that in a moment. Makon, in which there are treasuries of snow and hail, the chambers of dew, rain, and mist behind doors of fire. Aravot, where justice and righteousness, the treasures of life and of blessing, the souls of the righteous and the dew of resurrection are to be found. Right? So you've probably heard of the expression, the seven heavens.
Seventh heaven.
There is a very deep mystical theology around that, and we get reference to it here. There's other mystical writings from the Second Temple period that talk about journeys through the heavens and the seven heavens and the levels of Sheol and Gehenna. And so this is, I don't think that there's too much, this may be the only full passage like this in the Talmud that divides it up into these seven. And this, by the way, is a summary that cuts out a lot of other explanatory material. If you want the whole thing, you can go to Chagiga 112a. But then at the end of this, we get Sham Ofanim Usrafim V'chayot HaKodesh U'malachei HaSharet V'chisei HaKavod Melech El Chai Ram V'nisa Shochen Alehem. Right. So it's there, right? So in these seven heavens are the Ofanim, right? That's one class of angels from the word wheels. Srafim, that's another class, the seraphs. These are like the fiery snake angels, you could say. The Chayot HaKodesh, heavenly beings, right? Heavenly animals. Ezekiel sees all of these, by the way, in his vision. U'malachei HaSharet, right? The ministering angels, that's it. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, right? Those are the same angels. Ministering angels. V'chisei HaKavod, and the throne of glory. Melech El Chai Ram V'nisa Shochen Alehem, and the King, God, exalted and high, resides over all of them. Or Malach El Chai, he is enthroned or rules over all of them. And so this is in the Talmud as well. So the Talmud is actually just describing a mystical image of the cosmos with seven kind of concentric circles of spheres representing the seven layers of heaven. Each has its own role to play, in the upper realms or the lower realms. and they are filled with angels, and the angels have all sorts of jobs, but above all of those seven heavens, that's where God's throne is, and that's where God resides. So when we are reading these prayers that are in our prayer book and that are recited on a daily or a weekly basis and often sung to jubilant tunes, I think it's helpful to know that this cosmology is behind all of it, right? The person who composed these prayers, this is what they're describing, right? They're describing the songs of the angels in these seven heavens that are doing their job, right? Serving God, and in so doing, they're singing praises to God. Now let's look at this in the fifth layer, Ma'on, in which dwell the classes of ministering angels who sing by night and are silent by day. All right, why do they sing at night and they're silent?
There you go. There's something nice happening at night. It's the evil, right, that was referred to before, but now we've got angels singing.
Yeah, angels singing at night, right? How are they singing?
How? The question is, how are they singing?
How are they singing?
What do you mean?
The ministering angels at night. What's their song?
Oh, what's their song?
Cricket chirp.
Silent night. I don't know.
I think it's the twinkling stars.
Ah.
I was thinking about that, but
right? We see them at night, but not in the daytime.
But we don't hear them.
We don't hear them.
But
right?
this is this idea of the music of the spheres, right? That there is a harmony that exists in creation, in the kind of the movement of the stars and the constellations through the sky. Right. So now but why are they silent by day?
Because you can't hear them. There's so much noise going on during the day.
All right, but there's a reason. It doesn't have to be that way.
According to the
Right.
text here, it's because
Right.
during the day, Israel is singing to God.
Right. We do it during the daytime.
Okay.
So they become silent during the daytime so that Israel can do our job of singing praise to the Creator. And how do we sing that praise? Well, at least in the context of these prayers, we're doing it by describing what the angels do, and in some senses trying to emulate the angels. And we'll see some more direct emulations of angels coming up ahead. So to understand what's going on in our daily mundane services, they are full of mystical imagery and mystical belief about the cosmos. And by saying these words, we are actually participating in the mysteries of the cosmos.
So, Rabbi?
Yes.
So these seven heavens, which direction are they counting? Is the Valone the highest up away from us, or is it the closest on earth towards us? It
That's a
sounds
good
like
question.
one is the furthest away.
But I would think the
No, the
opposite,
curtain
because
has
you
to
have
be.
to open the curtain first, right?
Yeah, the curtain has to be between us and the sun if that's
Exactly.
responsible for the sun going in and out.
That's
Why?
Yeah,
furthest away.
I think it's going higher and higher.
Right.
So the Valone is closest to us?
Yeah.
Because snow and hail and dew seems closer to us than
Yeah, how do they get down?
where you let the sun be, access to the sun. So that's why I thought one was furthest away. And especially justice and righteousness, hopefully that's very close to us.
I was trying to find a picture of this. I was did not manage to find a picture in time for. I'll try and find.
Did Hieronymus Bosch do something?
Oh, I'm
Yeah, or
sure.
the-
No, there's a lot.
Flammarion engraving.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff. I want to find something that I can find someone specifically coming out of a Jewish context.
Okay.
That would be wonderful. I also want to just reflect on this idea of justice and righteousness, being contained within creation, right? That somehow light contains within it these qualities of justice and righteousness. The glory of God has these good qualities to it. I've been thinking a lot about that. There is a prayer that or a song, I should say, that Dana and I have been singing the last few weeks on for our Kabbalat Shabbat, a new one, Anan Va'arafel by Josh Warshawski. And it's a beautiful kind of almost like folky song, but the words that he's based on are from Psalms, and the words are Anan Va'arafel Svivav. So clouds and haze surround God. Tzedek umishpat mechon kiso. Justice and righteousness are the foundation of God's throne. Eish lefanav telech utlahet. Fire will advance before God and blaze forth. Right? So we've got this image in the Psalms of God on a heavenly throne, surrounded by this kavod, this glory, this cloud that makes it impossible to see through it. And there's fire coming out, and it burns everything in front of it. But contained within all of that, and this is the middle part of the verse, is justice and righteousness as the foundations of God's throne. And so we have this almost like violent, impenetrable image exterior, but with justice and righteousness at the core of it. And I've been kind of just thinking a lot about that image, and I think we find it here in this passage in the Talmud, in the continued mentioning as we're describing creation and light and all of these things, and talking about compassion and wisdom and justice and mercy as somehow being a foundational part of all of that. And these early prayer leaders and composers were bringing some of these themes and some of these beliefs into the prayers that they were then sharing and praying on behalf of the masses of Jews who maybe need a little bit of extra help, just like we do. We're fortunate that we have the Siddur too.
Yeah.
This is a weekday prayer, right?
Yeah. Yeah, these are the weekday prayers, and next week we'll look at the Shabbat versions of these. They're not versions of this, but they're replacements for them. And there's certainly a lot of similar themes, but because it's Shabbat, we've got more time. Nobody's got to get to work, so so we can spend 3 hours in shul instead of.
But not virtually, yes.
Yeah. So no, but and actually the rabbis, when they're talking about the laws of daily prayer, they actually talk about that, is that you can't make morning services when the weekdays take too long because people have to get to work. On Shabbat, though, you can take more time. So.
I was thinking about the trope of the weekday services. To me, it is very dull, and it's as compared to Shabbat trope. And so this is really helpful to dig deep into the meaning behind all that, because so often for me, I feel like it feels meaningless, like there's no excitement in the tone of recitation, and then the words just kind of felt meaningless. So this is helpful. But why is it that the trope is so different than the Shabbat prayers?
Oh, so that's I think another interesting question. I'll just give an example. Yishtabach, which appears in both Shabbat and in weekdays. So at least it's not called, so trope is referred to biblical cantillation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I used the wrong word.
Yeah, so the word is nusach.
Nusach?
Tradition. So it's the musical tradition, or you might better describe it as the mode, the mode of prayer. So like major and minor are probably the most well-known modes, but there's lots of other modes as well, and there are prayer modes, and those are referred to as the nusach.
Okay.
So for a weekday, Yishtabach would sound like this: Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu, and at the end, Barachot v'Hodot Me'ata Ve'ad Olam, something like that. For Shabbat, Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu, and at the end, Barachot v'Hodot Me'ata Ve'ad Olam, Baruch Atah Hashem, Kel Melech Gadol B'Tishbach. Lots, much
exactly.
grander.
It makes you want to wake up versus getting up and doing this morning prayer, and it wants to put you to sleep.
Yeah, and in the Shabbat one also, a prayer leader can extemporanea, right? Can elaborate and can musically elaborate. And interestingly, they are in the same musical mode.
Really?
So if you were to break it down and just look at the notes and look at the steps between the notes, you would find that they are in the same mode. It's just that the one on Shabbat explores a much higher range of the mode. And so there's a lot more movement, and it makes it a lot more interesting and a lot more beautiful.
It sounds far more major to me on Shabbat.
It's so it's the Ahava Rabbah mode. So it actually gets a name of one of the major prayers in the service. So it's called Ahava Rabbah. It's also referred to as Phragish. That would be the klezmer name for it. And I think it's related to Phrygian. Phrygian.
Yeah, Phrygian mode.
Phrygian mode. So I don't think it's exactly the same, but it's anyways, I'm sure Sherry, you could look something.
I can speak to early mode, but yeah.
And it also has some other relationships to some of the musical prayer modes on the Arabian Peninsula. So I think there's a mode called Hejaz, Hejaz, which I think is similar to the Phragish or Ahava Rabbah mode. And other Jewish prayer modes have names sometimes that are connected with other kind of major parts of the service. So the Friday night Shabbat mode is called Adonai Malach.
And that's the best, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's Friday night.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I just wanted to mention to you, Abe just thought of it for a second here, that the expression, I'm in seventh heaven.
Yeah. Yeah, where does that expression come from?
Well, if you look at the seventh heaven here, the justice and righteousness, the treasures of life and blessing, the souls of the righteous and the dew of resurrection.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And the throne of God.
That's where I want to be.
Yeah, really. That's great. Good job, Elizabeth.
Yeah, so I wonder that expression, the seventh heaven, if but there are other systems for the cosmos and different placing things. This just happens to be Reish Lakich's, and I suspect I'm not a mystic, but I suspect that there are lots of other descriptions in other texts that go into even greater detail.
I'm looking at Wikipedia, and it references lots of places. What it does say is that Vilon is the layer closest to the earth, and that Arbot is the farthest away, and that's because that's where the throne of God is.
Okay. All right, so that makes.
Yeah, I see here it says in Islam and in Kabbalah, the highest heaven is where God and the most exalted angels dwell, a state of intense happiness. We were in seventh heaven. That's what that means. So it's the top layer. Yeah.
There's the top layer, the first is the seventh.
The loan will be the bottom, and then it goes up from there.
So we could start saying, I'm in Arabot.
Yes.
What'd you say, Sharon?
I said, we could, instead of saying I'm in seventh heaven, why don't we just start saying I'm in Arabot? It's a little more poetic.
Or secret code.
Yeah.
There you go. Libby, I'll know what you're talking about. You'll know what I'm talking about.
All right. Well, let's stop sharing it.
Welcome back, Rabbi.
Thank you. So
Thank you for your help. I don't know what happened today. I went like I usually do. I've never had trouble getting on, and it said it's already in